Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Aunty Andrew's Reading Corner. I am your delightful host, Andrea, and thank you for joining me again. I'm actually on time this time, so I'll give it a minute for some people to come online. Um, Off the top, I don't know if everyone else is having the same issue. It's like I'm hot. I don't know if it's hot or cold out. You know what I mean? There's that part in the year where like I'm like sweating, but I'm also cold. You know, I went out today. I had a nice summer dress, but I brought my smock too because it's like just that time of year in Vancouver, maybe only here, I'm not sure, where you're flushed all day because you feel hot, but you have to have something for your extremities. So anyway, so right now I've got the window shut, but I'll probably open it halfway through so I don't die of a coronary. Welcome and thank you for joining me again. Hi, Jen. Hey, Crystal. Mwah, love you guys. I think my cousin Michelle's gonna be late, but I don't know why. I just have that weird feeling that she will be. Before I get into the book, I wanted to do a quick shout out to the doctors and nurses at all the medical centers. I went to the doctor today because I fell 2 weeks ago. Go live with Jennifer Page. It's offering me all these confusing things. I'm not sure what to do with. Jen, if you have a page and I can join it, I'll do it sometime, but maybe not today. Anyway, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, I was looking into a noise complaint on the Saturday night, and I tripped and fell in the dark driveway. And anyway, I've been limping through the week. I kind of I just hurt a lot of things. But the thing that didn't kind of recover was my shoulder, my left shoulder, of course, my most useful one because I'm left-handed. And so it turns out I do have a torn rotator cuff. So, but I wanted to mention though, because I haven't been to the doctor in, well, certainly not since COVID. And what delightful people. Like, honestly, I'm so impressed with how they've got it organized. And, I can imagine most people aren't all that nice when they're going in there. And, the way they have it set up, like they have, I called for a consultation on the phone first, then I went in today. That was yesterday, then today I went in. But they're just so nice, really very welcoming, not even a bit of edge on them. Just courteous, kind, like almost like they're having the best day ever, not just being nice. And I really appreciated it, and I just want to say thanks. And not just at the doctor office, at the x-ray clinic as well. I was there, and they were just a delight. We were laughing and having a great time. And so really, hats off to all of you, because, even though I'm sure you're having a lot of challenges and a lot of, not such fantastic clients coming through your door and dealing with people who are in pain and being scared every day for being exposed to what's going on. So, well done. Really good job. I also wanted to do a shout out for a very good friend of mine, Michelle Livingston, who I've known for 35 years or something. We went to high school together. Anyway, Michelle, I saw her post yesterday on Facebook, and I'm just doing this because I wanted to. She didn't ask me to. But I know I have a lot of people in North Vancouver who have dogs and who are busy and may not have the time or the inclination to take them for a really good walk. And I'm not talking like a drag around the park. Michelle she is a personal trainer, and her business is called Personal Best Training and Nutrition. And she has opened her services to dog walking, dog hiking. Like, this chick's ripped. Like, she's very, very fit, and she takes very, very, very good care of herself. She's incredibly knowledgeable in health and nutrition and proper exercise and fitness. And I know that transfers into her love of canines. She's had large breed dogs like me. She's literally the only person that I would ever trust to take care of my dog for me. So I highly recommend that if you need that service in North Vancouver, reach out to Michelle. If you're not sure who Michelle is, reach out to me and I will send you the link to her website. I highly recommend. Okay, so I am going to go ahead. Hang on a second here. Someone's tenant. They don't realize it's after 7. Anyway, that was a complaint. Someone telling me someone's banging. I'll deal with it after I read. So anyway, what I'm going to do is just go ahead and continue with our beautiful tale. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, written by Judy Blume, written 1970. I really hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. I was talking with my cousin Ricky this morning, and he was telling me how much he's enjoyed it, because when he was a boy, of course, it wasn't the kind of book he would have reached for. But now, as an adult, it's incredibly humorous. So Here we go with chapter 8. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. On Friday morning, when we walked into our room, there was a test paper on everyone's desk. Everybody's paper was marked and had the proper name on it. I got a 98. I felt great. Freddie Barnett didn't feel great at all. He got a 53. Mr. Benedict didn't say anything about our names not being on the test papers. He just stood there and smiled. "Good morning, class," he said, without clearing his throat. Sorry, that was me. I think he knew that he had won the battle. Later that day, Mr. Benedict reminded us of our individual projects again. He told us not to wait until the last minute and think we could whip something up then. He said by the end of next week, we should all know our topic and start in on our notes. I thought a lot about it, but I didn't know anything meaningful that I was willing to share with Mr. Benedict. I mean, I couldn't very well come up with a year-long study about bras and what goes in them, or my feelings about moose, or about God. Or could I? I mean, not about God exactly. I could never tell Mr. Benedict that, but maybe about religion. If I could figure out which religion to be, I'd know if I wanted to join the Y or the Jewish Community Center. That was meaningful, wasn't it? I'd have to think about it. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. What would you think of me doing a project on religion? You wouldn't mind, would you, God? I'd tell you all about it, and I won't make any decisions without asking you first. I think it's time for me to decide what to be. I can't go on being nothing forever, can I? The following Saturday morning, my mother drove me to the highway to get the New York bus. It was my first time going alone, and my mother was nervous. "Listen, Margaret, don't sit next to any men. Either sit alone or pick out a nice lady. And try to sit up front. If the bus isn't air-conditioned, open your window. And when you get there, ask a lady to show you the way downstairs. Grandma will meet you at the information desk." I know. We've been over it 36 times, but when the bus came, my mother got out of the car and shouted to the bus driver, "This little girl is traveling alone. Please keep an eye on her. It's her first trip." "Hey, Megan. Good to see you." "Don't worry, lady," the bus driver told my mother. Then my mother waved to me. I made a face at her and looked the other way. I found Grandma right where she was supposed to be. She gave me a big kiss. Grandma smelled delicious. She was wearing a green suit and had on lots of green eyeshadow to match. Her hair was silver blonde. Grandma's hair color changes about once a month. Sounds familiar. When we were out of the bus terminal, Grandma said, "You look beautiful, Margaret. I love your hair." Grandma always had something nice to say to me, and my hair did look better. I read that if you brush it good, it can grow up to like an inch a month. We went to lunch at a restaurant near Lincoln Center. During my chocolate parfait, I whispered, "I'm wearing a bra. Can you tell?" "Of course I can tell," Grandma said. "You can?" I was really surprised. I stopped eating. "Well, how do you think it makes me look?" "Much older," Grandma said, between sips of her coffee. I didn't know whether to believe her or not, so I just believed her. Then we went to the concert. And then, hi, you're a page out. You're just a page in. Don't worry. I want to listen, but I'm watching the end of Ferris Bueller. Bueller. No, go ahead and enjoy that, babe. You can watch this anytime. Love ya. Thanks for checking in. So then we went to the concert. I didn't fidget like when I was a kid. I sat very still and paid attention to the music. During intermission, Grandma and I walked around outside. I love that fountain in the middle of the Lincoln Center. I love it more than the concert itself. I love to watch the people walk by. Once I saw a model having her picture taken by the fountain. It was freezing cold and she was wearing a summer dress. That's when I decided not to be a model, even if I did get beautiful one day. In the cab on the way back to the bus terminal, I thought about Grandma being Jewish. She was the perfect person to help me start my project. So I asked her, "Can I go to temple with you sometime?" Grandma absolutely stared at me. I never knew anyone could open her eyes so wide. "What are you saying?" Are you saying you want to be Jewish? She held her breath. No, I'm saying I'd like to go to temple and see what it's all about. My Margaret! Grandma threw her arms around me. I think the cab driver thought we were crazy. I knew you were a Jewish girl at heart. I always knew it. Grandma took out Elise hanky and dabbed her eyes. I'm not, Grandma, I insisted. You know I'm not anything. You can say it, but I'll never believe it. Never. She blew her nose. When she finished blowing, she said, I know what it is. You've made a lot of Jewish friends in Farbrook. Am I right? No, Grandma. My friends have nothing to do with this. Then what? I don't understand. I just want to see what it's all about. So can I? I certainly was not going to tell Grandma about Mr. Benedict. Grandma sat back in her seat and beamed at me. I'm thrilled. I'm going right home to call the rabbi. You'll come with me on Rosh Hashanah. Then she stopped smiling and asked, Does your mother know? I shook my head. Your father? I shook it again. Grandma slapped her hand against her forehead. Be sure to tell them that it wasn't my idea. Would I ever be in trouble? Oh, don't worry, Grandma. That's ridiculous, my mother said when I told her. You know Daddy and I, how Daddy and I feel about religion. You said I could choose when I grew up. But you're not ready to choose yet, Margaret. I just want to try it out, I argued. I'm going to try church too, so don't get hysterical. I'm not hysterical. I just think it's foolish for a girl of your age to bother herself with religion. Can I go? I asked. Well, I'm not going to stop you, my mother said. Fine, then I'll go. On Rosh Hashanah morning, while I was still in bed, I said, Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. I'm going to temple today with Grandma. It's a holiday, but I guess you know that. Well, my father thinks it's a mistake, and my mother thinks the whole idea is crazy, but I'm going anyway. I'm sure this will help me decide what I want to be. I've never been inside a temple or a church. I'll look for you, God. Chapter 9. I had a new suit and a small velvet hat. My mother said everyone wears new clothes for the Jewish holidays. It was hot for October, and my father said he remembered it was always hot on the Jewish holidays when he was a kid. I had to wear white gloves. They made my hands sweat. By the time I got to New York, the gloves were pretty dirty, so I took them off and stuffed them into my pocketbook. Grandma met me at our usual spot, in the bus terminal, and took me in a taxi to her temple. We got there at 10:30. Grandma had to show a card to an usher, and then he led us to our seats, which were in the 5th row in the middle. Grandma whispered to the people sitting near her that I was her granddaughter, Margaret. The people looked at me and smiled. I smiled back. I was glad when the rabbi stepped out on the stage and held up his hands. While this was going on, soft organ music was playing. I thought it sounded really wonderful. The rabbi was dressed in a long white robe. He looked like a priest, except he didn't have on that backwards collar that a priest wears. Also, he had a little hat on his head that Grandma called a yarmulke. The rabbi welcomed us and then started a lot of things I didn't understand. We had to stand up and sit down a lot, and sometimes we all read together in English from a prayer book. I didn't understand too much of what I was reading. Other times the choir sang and the organ played. That was definitely the best part. Some of the service was in Hebrew, and I was surprised to see that Grandma could recite along with the rabbi. I looked around a lot to see what was going on, but since I was in the 5th row, there wasn't much for me to see except the 4 rows in front of me. I knew it wouldn't be polite to actually turn my head and look behind me. There were 2 big silver bowls filled with white flowers up on the stage. They were very pretty. At 11:30, the rabbi made a speech. A sermon, Grandma called it. At first, I tried very hard to understand what he was talking about, but after a while, I gave up and started counting different colored hats. I counted 8 brown, 6 black, 3 red, a yellow, and a leopard before the rabbi finished. Then we all stood up again, and everyone sang a song in Hebrew that I didn't know. And that was it. I expected something else. I don't know what exactly. A feeling, maybe. But I suppose you have to go more than once to know what it's all about. As we filed out of the aisles, Grandma pulled me to one side, away from the crowd. How would you like to meet the rabbi, Margaret? I don't know, I said. I really wanted to get outside. Where are you going to? Grandma smiled at me. I've told him all about you. We stood in line waiting to shake hands with the rabbi. After a long time, it was our turn. I was face to face with Rabbi Kellerman. He was kind of young and looked a little like Miles J. Benedict Jr. He wasn't skinny, though. Grandma whispered to me, "Shake hands, Margaret." I held out my hand. "This is my granddaughter, Rabbi, the one I told you about, Margaret Simon." The rabbi shook my hand. "Yes, of course, Margaret. Good Yom Tov." "Yes," I said. The rabbi laughed. "It means Happy New Year. That's what we're celebrating today." "Oh," I said. "Oh, Happy New Year to you, Rabbi." "Did you enjoy our service?" he asked. "Oh, yes," I said. "I just loved it." Good. He pumped my hand up and down some more. "Come back any time. Get to know us, Margaret. Get to know us and God." I had to go through the 3rd degree when I got home. "Well," my mother said, "how was it?" "Okay, I guess." "Did you like it?" "It was interesting," I said. "Well, did you learn anything?" my father wanted to know. "Well," I said, "in the first 5 rows there were 8 brown hats and 6 black ones." My father laughed. "When I was a kid, I used to count feathers on the hats." Then we laughed together. "Are you there, God?" It's me, Margaret. "I'm really on my way now. By the end of the school year, I'll know all there is to know about religion. And before I start junior high, I'll know which one I am. Then I'll be able to join the Y or the center like everybody else." But will she? Love it. Anyway, chapter 10. Okay, sorry. Let me just take a sip of this delightful juice. 3 things happened the first week of November. Laura Danker wore a sweater to school for the first time. Mr. Benedict's eyes almost popped out of his head. Actually, I didn't notice Mr. Benedict's eyes, but Nancy told me. Freddie the lobster noticed too. He asked me, "How come you don't look like that in a sweater, Margaret?" Then he laughed hard and slapped his leg. Very funny, I thought. I wore sweaters every day since I had so many of them, all made expressly for me by Grandma. Even if I stuffed my bra with socks, I still wouldn't look like that Laura Danker. I wondered if it was true that she went behind the A&P with Evan and Moose. Why would she do something so stupid like that? What reminded me of Moose was that he had cut our grass and cleaned up our leaves and said he'd be back in the spring. So unless I bumped into him at Nancy's house, I wouldn't see him all winter. Not that he even knew I existed. I'd had to hide from him ever since that we must incident. But I watched him secretly from my bedroom window. The second thing that happened was that I went to church with Janie Loomis. Janie and I had gotten pretty friendly. We were especially friendly in gym because Ruth, the girl who was second in line, was absent a lot. So Janie and I got to talk, and once I came right out and asked her if she went to church. "When I have to," she said. So I asked her if I could go with her sometime, just to see what it was like, and she said, "Sure, how about Sunday?" So I went. The funniest thing was it was just like the temple, except it was all in English. But we read from a prayer book that didn't make sense, and the minister gave a sermon I couldn't follow, and I counted 8 black hats, 4 red ones, 6 blue, and 2 fur. At the end of the service, everyone sang a hymn. Then we stood on line to shake hands with the minister, and by then, well, I was a pro at it. Janie introduced me. "This is my friend Margaret Simon. She's no religion." Bitch. I almost fainted. What did Janie have to go and say that for? The minister looked at me like I was a freak. Then he smiled with a, "Aha, maybe I'll win her over" look. "Welcome to the First Presbyterian Church, Margaret. I hope you'll come back again." "Thank you," I said. "Are you there, God?" It's me, Margaret. "I've been to church. I didn't feel anything special in there, God, even though I wanted to. I'm sure it was nothing to do with you. Next time, I'll try harder." During this time, I talked to Nancy every night. My father wanted to know why we had to phone each other so often when we were together in school all day. "What can you possibly have to discover after only 3 hours?" he asked. I didn't even try to explain. Lots of times we just did our math homework over the phone. When we were done, Nancy called Gretchen to check her answers, and I called Jeannie. The third thing that happened that week was the principal of our school announced over the loudspeaker that the PTA was giving a Thanksgiving square dance for the three sixth grade classes. Mr. Benedict asked us if we knew how to square dance. Most of us didn't. Nancy told the 4 PTSs the square dance was going to be really super. And she knew all about it because her mother was on the committee, of course. She said we should all write down who we wanted to dance with and she'd see what she could do about it. Turned out that we all wanted Philip Leroy, so Nancy said, "Forget it, I'm no magician." Probably the only thing she can't do. For the next 2 weeks, our gym period was devoted to square dancing lessons. Mr. Benedict said if we were being given this party, the least we could do to show our appreciation was to learn the basic steps. We practiced with records, and Mr. Benedict jumped around a lot, clapping his hands. When he had to demonstrate a step, he used Laura Danker as his partner. He said it was because she was tall enough to reach his shoulder properly, but Nancy gave me a knowing look. Anyway, none of the boys in our class wanted to be Laura's partner because they were all a lot smaller than her. Even Philip Leroy only came up to her chin as he was the tallest. The problem with square dancing lessons was that most of the boys were a lot more interested in stepping on our feet than they were in learning how to dance. And a few of them were so good at it, they could step on us in time to music. Mostly I concentrated on not getting my feet squashed. On the morning of the square dance, I dressed in my new skirt and blouse. Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, Michelle. Good to see you. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. I can't wait until 2 o'clock, God. That's when our dance starts. Do you think I'll get Philip Leroy for a partner? It's not so much that I like him as a person, God, but as a boy, he's very handsome. And I'd love to dance with him just once or twice. Thank you, God. The PTA decorated the gym. It was supposed to look like a barn, I think. There were 2 piles of hay and 3 scarecrows, and a big sign on the wall in yellow letters saying, "Welcome to the sixth grade square dance," as if we didn't know. I was glad my mother wasn't a chaperone. It's bad enough trying to act natural at a dance, but when your mother's there, it's impossible. I know because Mrs. Wheeler was a chaperone and Nancy was a wreck. The chaperones were dressed funny, like farmers or something. I mean, Nancy's mother wore dungarees, a plaid shirt, and a big straw hat. I didn't blame Nancy for pretending not to know her. We had a genuine square dance caller. He was dressed up a lot like Mrs. Wheeler. He stood on the stage and told us what steps to do. He also worked the record player. He stamped his feet and jumped around, and now and then I saw him mop his face off with a red handkerchief. Mr. Benedict kept telling us to get into the spirit of the party. Relax and enjoy yourselves, he said. The 3 sixth grades were supposed to mingle, but the 4 PTSs, we stuck together. We had to line up every time there was a new dance. The girls lined up on one side and the boys on the other. That's how you got a partner. The only trouble was there were 4 more girls than boys, so whoever wound up last online had to dance with another leftover girl. That only happened to me and Janie once, thank goodness. What we did was try to figure out who our partner was going to be in advance. Like, I knew when I was 4th in line that Norman Fishbean was going to be my partner because he was 4th in line on the boys' side. So I switched around fast because Norman Fishbean is the biggest drip in my class. Well, at least one of the biggest drips. Also, Freddie Barnett. Shut up. Sorry, loud people. Norman Fishbean was the biggest drip. Well, at least one of the biggest drips. Also, Freddie Barnett was to be avoided because all he would do was tease me about how come I didn't look like Lord Danker in a sweater. But I noticed that once he danced with her, his face was so red he looked more like the lobster than he did when he was all sunburned. The girls shuffled around more than the boys because most of us wanted to get Philip Leroy. And finally, I got him. This is how it happened. After everyone had a partner, we had to make a square. My partner was Jay Hassler, who was very polite and didn't try to step on my foot once. Then the caller told us to switch partners with whoever was on our right side. Well, Philip Leroy was with Nancy on my right side. And Nancy was so mad she almost cried right in front of everyone. Even though I was thrilled to have Philip Leroy all to myself for a whole record, he was one of the footsteppers. And dancing with him made my hands sweat so bad I had to wipe them off of my new skirt. At 4 o'clock, the chaperones served us punch and cookies, and at 4:45, the dance was over, and my mother picked me up in our new car. My father gave in around Halloween when my mother explained that she couldn't even get a quart of milk because she had no car. And that Margaret couldn't possibly walk to and from school in bad weather, and the bad weather would be coming very, very soon. My mother didn't like my father's suggestion that if she got up early and drove him to the station, she could use his car all day long. Our new car is a Chevy. It's green. My mother was in a hurry to drive home from the square dance because she was in the middle of a new painting. It was a picture of a lot of different fruits in honor of Thanksgiving. My mother gives away a whole bunch of pictures every Christmas. My father thinks they wind up in other people's attics. Chapter 11. By the first week in December, we no longer used our secret names at the PTS meetings. It was too confusing, Nancy said. Also, we just about gave up on our boy books. For one thing, the names never changed. Nancy managed to shift hers around. It was easy for her, with 18 boys. But Janie and Gretchen and I always listed Philip Leroy as number 1. There was no suspense about the whole thing. And I wondered, did they list Philip Leroy because they really liked him, or were they doing it because doing what I did, making him number 1 because he was so good looking? Maybe they were ashamed to write who they really liked too. Probably. The day that Gretchen finally got up the guts to sneak out her father's anatomy book, we met at my house in the bedroom with the door closed and a chair shoved in front of it. We sat on the floor in a circle with the book open to the male body. Do you suppose that's what Philip Leroy looks like without his clothes on? Janie asked. Naturally dope, Nancy said. He's male, isn't he? Look at all those veins and stuff, Janie said. Well, we all have them, said Gretchen. I think they're ugly, Janie said. You better never be a doctor or a nurse, Gretchen told her. They have to look at this stuff all the time. Turn the page, Gretchen, Nancy said. The next page was the male reproductive system. None of us said anything. We just looked until Nancy told us, my brother looks like that. How do you know? I said. He walks around naked, Nancy said. My father used to walk around naked, Gretchen said. But lately he's stopped doing it. My aunt went to a nudist colony last summer, Janie said. No kidding, Nancy looked up. She stayed a month, Janie told us. My mother didn't talk to her for 3 weeks after that. She thought it was a disgrace. My aunt's divorced. Because of the nudist colony? I asked. No, Janie said. She was divorced before she went. What do you suppose they do there? Gretchen asked. Walk around naked. My aunt says it's very peaceful, but I'll never walk around naked in front of anybody. What about when you get married? Gretchen said. Even then, Janie insisted. You're a prude, Nancy said. I am not. It was nothing to do with being a prude. When you grow, you'll change your mind, Nancy told her. You'll want everyone to see you, like those girls in Playboy. What girls in Playboy? Janie asked. Didn't you ever see a Playboy? Where would I see it? Janie asked. My father gets it, I said. Do you have it around? Nancy asked. Sure. We'll get it, Nancy told me. Now? I asked. Of course. Well, I don't know, I said. Listen, Margaret, Gretchen went to all the trouble of sneaking out her father's medical book. The least you could do is show us Playboy. So I opened up my bedroom door and I went downstairs, trying to remember where I had seen it last. I didn't want to ask my mother, not that it was so wrong to show it to my friends. I mean, if it was so wrong, my father shouldn't get it at all, right? Although lately I think he's been hiding it because it's never in the magazine rack where it used to be. Finally, I found it in his night table drawer, and I thought if my mother caught me and asked me what I was doing, I'd say we were making booklets, and I needed some old magazines to cut up. But she didn't catch me. Sorry, I have to clear my eye, I can't see. Nancy opened it right up to the naked girl in the middle. On the page before, there was a story about her. It said, Hillary Bright is 18 years old. 18? That's only 6 more years, Nancy squealed. But look at the size of her. They're huge, Janie said. Do you suppose we'll all look like that at 18? Gretchen asked. If you ask me, I think there's something wrong with her, I said. She looks out of proportion. Do you suppose that's what Laura Danker looks like? Janie asked. No, not yet, Nancy said. But she might at 18. Our meeting ended with 50 rounds of we must increase our bust. Chapter 12. Hi, hero. Good to see you, bud. On December 11th, Grandma sailed on a 3-week cruise to the Caribbean. She went every year. She had a bon voyage party in her room on the ship. This year, I was allowed to go. My mother gave Grandma a green silk box to keep her jewelry safe. It was very nice, all lined in white velvet. Grandma said thank you and that all her jewelry was for her Margaret. Anyway, so she had to take good care of it. Grandma always reminded me of how nobody lives forever and everything she has is for me, and I hate it when she talks like that. She once told me she had her lawyer prepare her funeral instructions so things would go the way she planned, such as the kind of box she wants to be buried in, and that she doesn't want any speeches at all, and that I should only come once or twice a year to see that her grave is looking nice and neat. We stayed on the ship half an hour, and then Grandma kissed me goodbye and promised to take me along with her one of these days. The next week, my mother started to address her Christmas cards, and for days at a time, she was frantically busy with them. She doesn't call them Christmas cards. Holiday greetings, she says. We don't celebrate Christmas exactly. We give presents, but my parents said that that's a traditional American custom. My father says my mother and her greeting cards have to do with her childhood. She sends them to people she grew up with, and they send cards back to her. So once a year, she finds out who married whom and who had what kids and stuff like that. Also, she sends one to her brother, whom I've never met. He lives in California. This year, I discovered something really strange, though. I discovered that my mother was sending a Christmas card to her parents in Ohio. I found out because I was looking through the pile of cards one day when I had a cold and stayed home from school. There it was, just like that. The envelope said, Mr. and Mrs. Paul Hutchins, and that's them, my grandparents. I didn't mention anything about it to my mother. I had the feeling that I wasn't supposed to know. In school, Mr. Benedict was running around trying to find out what happened to the new choir robes. The whole school was putting on a Christmas Hanukkah pageant for the parents, and our 6th grade class was the choir. We didn't even have to try out for it. Mr. Benedict's class will be the choir, the principal announced. We practiced singing every day with the music teacher. I thought by the time Christmas finally rolled around, I wouldn't have a voice left. We learned 5 Christmas carols and 3 Hanukkah songs, alto and soprano parts. Mostly the boys sang alto and the girls sang soprano. We'd been measured for our new choir robes right after Thanksgiving. The PTA decided that the old ones were really worn out. Our new ones would be green instead of black. We all had to carry pencil-sized flashlights instead of candles. We practiced marching down the halls and into the auditorium singing Adeste Fideles in English and Latin. We marched in 2 lines, boys and girls. Janie, and naturally in sized places. I walked right behind Janie because Ruth had moved away. My partner turned out to be Norman Fishbean. I never looked at him. I just marched looking straight ahead, singing very loud. A week before the pageant, Alan Gordon told Mr. Benedict that he wasn't going to sing the Christmas songs because it was against his religion. Then Lisa Murphy raised her hand and said that she wasn't going to sing the Hanukkah songs because it was against her religion. Mr. Benedict explained that songs were for everyone and had nothing at all to do with religion. But the next day, Alan brought in a note from home, and from then on he marched, but he didn't sing. Lisa sang when we marched, but she didn't even move her lips during the Hanukkah songs. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. I want you to know I'm giving a lot of thought to Christmas and Hanukkah this year. I'm trying to decide if one might be special for me. I'm really thinking hard, God, but so far I haven't come up with any answers. Our new green choir robes were delivered to the school the day before the pageant and were sent home with us to be pressed. The best thing about the pageant, besides wearing the robe and carrying the flashlight, was that I got to sit in the first row of choir seats, facing the audience, which meant that the kindergarten kids were right in front of me. Hi. Some of them tried to touch our feet with their feet. One little kid wet his pants during the scene where Mary and Joseph come to. So that's really close by. we're almost there. So I'm thinking, I always panic. I think, is that my building? Is there an ambulance here? Anyway, someone tried to touch our feet with their feet. One little kid wet his pants during the scene where Mary and Joseph come to the inn. He made a puddle on the floor right in front of Janie. Janie had to keep on singing and pretend that she didn't know. It was pretty hard not to laugh. School. That's a lot of alarms. Anyway, school closed for Vatican right after the pageant. When I got home, my mother told me that I had a letter. Sorry, I had to rush that last little bit. There is something going on, so I'm going to go because I've got a building there and a building here, and it sounds like it's right there. So I'm sorry, but that was actually where I was going to end anyway. We're at 7:48, perfect timing. Thank you all for joining me as usual. Love you all, and I will see you next time. I got to get out of these group chat things. I love you all. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you on Sunday as usual.